Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming.
We're 1.5 below.
2 dives here, boys.
We're looking at 10.5 to 42.
Hello podcast listeners, thanks again for joining us on the pod. I do hope you all enjoyed listening to part 1 of Tracy's interview. If you haven't listened to part 1, maybe jump back and give it a go first. It's full of stories from Tracy's early sailing career, getting her team together and taking on the world in the Whitbread Round the World race. She's a great storyteller, so please do give part 1 a listen. In this pod, we don't just hear from Tracy, we also talk to the man that directed the recent Maiden movie, a wonderful film about Tracy and her team and how they became the first all-female crew to sail around the world in that Whitbread race of the late 80s, early 90s. It's great to hear Alex's take on the whole story and how that all came to be. I must also say at this stage a big thanks to Tracy herself. I've wanted to chat to Tracy on the podcast for ages, and we'd have loved to have sat down in the same room together. But with things as they are right now, interviewing remotely was the right thing to do. I was a bit worried that may affect the intimacy of the podcast. You'll all know by now, I hope, that I love to sit down face to face with our guests, talking story with an interviewee. It's what I love doing. But a massive thanks to Tracy for being so honest and so open, even though we were either side of a link. Her storytelling is world class. She's so engaging. And in this edition especially, some of the things we talk about were pretty painful. So a massive, massive thanks for sharing. I hope you enjoy part 2 of the time I spent with Tracy Edwards.
He just said, "Oh my God, please tell me no one has made a film of this." And I said, "No one's made a film of this." How honest are we going to be about what happened? And I went, "Let's do it." You know, when world sailing is making decisions, that these women need to be there. And I know often they're not.
Tracy, we talked about Maiden, the movie, at the very start of the podcast. How did all that come about?
I went to do a talk for a primary school in East Sheen in London. And it was the end of a very long day, and I really didn't want to go and give a talk at a primary school. And I was, can I make an excuse and not go? And no, I've got to go. I can't let people down. So off I went. And Alex will probably tell you the same story, but he was like, "Oh, good, third child, these evenings that you have to go to at school," which of course we, as parents, we all say, but not out loud. And so neither of us really wanted to be there. And I did the talk, and he came up to me afterwards, and he just said, "Oh my God, please tell me no one has made a film of this." And I said, "No one's made a film of this." He said, I'm a documentary maker, and I've got to. This is just wow. Although he did initially start talking about scripts and actresses, and I was like, "Why would you do that?" And he was like, "Well, I'm guessing there's no footage." I thought, I don't know how old you think I am, Alex, but we actually did have a camera on the boat. So when I told him there was footage, he was like, a dog with 2 tails. And then I said, "Yeah, but the downside is we have no idea where this footage is. It's everywhere. We dropped it off as we went around the world. That's what you did in those days." So he was like, "Right, no, we're going to find it." And off we went. And it was interesting actually at the time, because I just found Maiden rotting in the Seychelles. So I'd gone from not really thinking about Maiden for 25 years to Maiden suddenly bursting back into my life. We're going to make a film, and I found her and I'm going to rescue her. So as I was trying to raise the money to buy Maiden, he was raising the money to make the film. Then we both got the money at the same time. And then while they were looking for the footage, we were restoring Maiden. So it's been this really weird sort of parallel journey with the film and the sequel.
It was meant to be. It's a very good film, Tracy. I watched it at the Sailing Film Festival in northern Spain. And as it finished, I'm sure this has happened everywhere, but as it finished, there was a standing ovation. And the applause just... it was such a moment, went on and on and on. It has a level of honesty, a real rawness that I actually didn't expect. I just sort of assumed I knew the story. Did you expect that when you watched it? Did you want it?
I didn't know what to expect from the film, if I'm completely honest. I mean, we didn't have editorial rights, which may not have been the most sensible agreement to have signed, but Alex, we really trusted him, and that was really important, because when he said to me, I want to make this documentary, I said, well, I'm going to have to talk to the crew, because this is our story, it's not just mine, and we really all have to agree to this. And he said, oh, absolutely. But the more I got to know him, the more I trusted him, and when I eventually called everyone and said, there's this guy I've met that wants to make a documentary, he's going to find all the footage and wants to do some interviews, everyone was up for it. And I remember, I can't remember who it was, but one of them said to me, how honest are we going to be about what happened? And I went, let's do it, warts and all. And let's all just say, and Alex said, if we really don't like something, we can get it taken out. I said, but let's show young girls that life is sometimes messy. And if it doesn't go according to plan, keep going or look for another way, or, let's really show the grittiness of what happened. I thought that was really, really important. And that's what he did. And as I say, when we saw it for the first time, we were completely blown away. I remember the first thing I thought was, and apparently we all did this, first thing I thought was, I looked at myself at the age of, 23 when I started Maiden. Oh my goodness. And I remember thinking, I'm saying some quite profound things there. And I don't ever remember saying anything profound when I was 23. I thought I was a bit of a muppet, if I'm honest. And so I could never figure out how Maiden happened. So it was such a lift, and what a gift. I mean, I do watch it every so often, with this project, if we're struggling or, something's happening, I will watch it and go, right, you did it before, you can do it again.
And some of the sailing shots I loved as well. I mean, Alex, well, we will speak to him, but he did so well, didn't he, with what he had. He did absolutely brilliantly. And I guess it feels, I mean, to me, I was just out of school, I was in college. It was, right at the time to make a difference. And it was great to see those imagery again. And weren't the commentators really posh? I mean, that's what I think now. They were so posh,
I know, but it's also, it was very BBC. And, and it's interesting, actually, I did the film festival in Annapolis, and not the film festival, we did a screening in Annapolis, and Gary Jobson, who I raced with about 500 years ago when I was an absolute nobody, on a boat called Jubilation in Newport, he was comparing and hosting, and we watched the film, and then we do a Q&A. And he says, of course, I always believed that you could do this. And, I said, and I went, Gary, did you not notice that the commentary as we start I think it's the first or the second leg, is someone in the background going, and here's the girls trying their best. I said, that's you. He went, oh my goodness, is that me? I went, yes, because we've all changed since then, thank goodness.
The movie was released in June 2019 and was produced by the London film company New Black Films. So while making this podcast, we decided to get in touch with the film's director, Alex Holmes. I think in sailing now, especially from events like the Volvo Ocean Race, we're a little blasé about the amazing job the onboard video guys do. The drone footage, the film from the Southern Ocean. It's all over our social media feeds while the races are on, so it's something we've become quite used to. In contrast, back then, as the 80s became the 90s, waterproof cameras weren't a thing. It was mostly filmed on VHS cameras, and what the crew did film was often dropped off at the next stopover. To make this movie then, the team had to go on a worldwide treasure hunt, seeking out footage from wherever they could find it. And the result is a compelling documentary. I started off by asking Alex for his version of how the whole film got off the ground.
Well, it actually came about when I went to my daughter's school. She was just leaving primary school, aged 11. I went as a proud parent, but not expecting a scintillating evening. She was my third child, and I had been to a couple of these things already, and I basically knew the score. A lot of applause and some not very good singing, but a lot of pride. But that year, the school had decided to mix it up, and they had just got someone who lived in the neighborhood to come and talk to the children and say a few inspiring words. And that person was Tracy. And I think, maybe 5 minutes in to Tracy speaking to this group of 11-year-olds sat on the floor in front of us all, I thought, wow, this is a good story. And then 10 minutes in, I thought, this is a great story. And then I thought, why haven't I heard of this story before? Why don't I know this story? And by the end of it, I was thinking, this would make a great film, but I'm sure it must have already been done. And I went up to Tracy immediately afterwards, after the talk was over, obviously after congratulating my daughter and giving her a big hug. I made a beeline for Tracy and said, look, that's an amazing story. And I just wondered if it had ever been turned into a film in the way that you told it. And she said that it hadn't. And I started saying, well, I'd love to talk to you about that because I found it very inspiring. And I think it's a story that a lot of people would love to hear. And I arranged to meet up with her a couple of days later because she was fairly local to where I live. And I started explaining to her about the whole process and writing scripts and getting cast and how many times you started off on these projects, how many false starts there were and all that kind of stuff. And it was only, I think, perhaps on our second or third meeting that she said, as I was talking about doing the research, she said, you do know that we had cameras on board the whole way around? And I kind of, at that moment, my heart leapt because I suddenly realized that the assumptions that I'd made, which were basically that this would have to be a dramatic telling of this story, a narrative film, if you like, with actors and reconstruction and everything, because obviously it happened a long time ago, 1989, and before that, in an era before there were small cameras. A lot of it happens away from the land in the worst possible environment for cameras from that era, especially. So I just assumed that there wouldn't be any footage. And when she said that they had a camera on board, I just thought that's fantastic. And of course, my mind immediately pictured a sort of a pristine vault of tapes of their footage in a single box somewhere that all I would have to do would be to access that, and the film would make itself. Of course, it wasn't quite that simple, but it was an amazing opportunity and a chance to tell the film in a format that actually is my first love. I started out as a documentary filmmaker, and so it was a great way of doing it. And I think it's a form that harnesses the power of that in the immediacy of the footage that they shot while they were sailing, but also that beautiful reflection that you get from these people looking back on their experiences with the benefit of 25 years of hindsight and life experience, and they can actually see and have some sense of what it was that they achieved. So yeah, I was very happy, and that's how it all began.
What was it about Tracy's story particularly that really grabbed your interest? What was the real nuggets of it?
Well, the thing that really stood out for me that I thought was a fantastic lesson for those 11-year-olds, but also spoke to me in my own life, was the power of determination, and Tracy's almost reckless adherence to this idea that she had, that she was going to enter this race and she was going to put this boat into this race, no matter what opposition she faced. And that when you have an idea that you absolutely believe in, that if you completely cleave to it and you completely believe in it, there is always a way of realizing it in some form or other. Maybe not in exactly the way that you imagine when you start out, but that if you commit to something interesting will happen. And I just felt like that was a story that spoke to me personally, a story that I certainly felt spoke to those children in that audience that first time I heard it. And that it was a chance to tell a story that was about a bigger issue, about the whole an era of chauvinism. So I felt not only was it a good and inspiring story, I felt it was an important story to tell. Important, to recognize that those challenges hadn't gone away. And sometimes choosing a a story of something that happened in the past is a great way to shine light on what's going on right now. And so those were the reasons I felt it was the right story for me.
You had footage from all different sources. How did you go about getting that?
Well, we first up went to the Volvo, who are now the owners of the race, and they fortunately had some archive, but it was, I mean, who would put energy and money into keeping that archive pristine? But it was pretty chaotic. You know, there were a bunch of mismatched tapes, things that said one thing and said another. And basically what that gave us was it gave us enough basic material to start a detective journey where we would say, okay, let's work out where each of these things come from. And then, you know, you would find bits of material that contained the same shot, only a slightly longer version of that shot. And then you would see it on a compilation tape somewhere else and realize there was other coverage of the same events. And so basically we spent 2 years putting together, you know, going around the world to all of the broadcasters who had broadcast the race at the time, going into their libraries, looking for stuff, getting everybody to search, to search their attics for any old VHSs they might have. And one great benefit for us was that Tracy's mum was an avid off-air recorder. So she basically recorded almost everything that involved Tracy that was on television onto a VHS. And while a lot of that was absolutely execrable quality, it was a guide to what we might find if we went looking. And then occasionally we couldn't find it in any better quality than Tracy's mum had recorded it in. And so that kind of forced us to use that in the show. But for me, that's part of the, if I can use the word charm of the documentary, is that you get a sense of the era and the period because some of it's on this ropey VHS footage. It's not pristine or even film quality. You know, it puts it very much in its era, that video footage.
Let's talk about Tracy. She's a complex character, isn't she? I mean, on one hand, I think, you know, she's so bold and confident, but on the other hand, so wounded by it all. You know, what did you make of her?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, Tracy has an incredible set of skills, not just sailing and navigation skills, but life skills. You know, as I think her determination was absolutely front and center in that, but also her strength of picking a team, of knowing who would work together, how they would work together, the complex leadership role that actually selecting the group of people you're going to surround yourself with involves. And I think in a way that was perhaps her greatest skill, was picking a crew that actually gave her exactly what she needed to complete that race. First of all, to get to the start line, you know, which was one of the biggest challenge. I mean, I think sometimes they think the race itself was a walk in the park compared to actually getting to the start line. You know, Tracy was vulnerable and difficult and had picked a challenge that, you know, was huge and that brought, you know, great opposition from some people, and some of that opposition was very personal. And people were looking to pick holes in the individual relationships and the personal dynamics within the team. And, you know, that's really tough. I mean, I don't know, you know, for anybody who's ever been in the public spotlight, that's a really hard thing to handle, especially as I think a lot of the media thought that was the story, that they were a human interest story. They weren't a sporting story. And so they were looking for that. They were looking for those internal conflicts that would give them drama and things to write about in the papers. You know, and I think that's tough to wear when you feel you're in the public spotlight. But, you know, to her credit, Tracy kind of managed it all. I mean, from a filmmaking point of view, you know, Tracy's also very transparent. You know, I mean, one of the things I loved about the footage was any time the camera found her on board, you could tell exactly what she was thinking, which often wasn't great. You know, she was thinking, you know, to hell with this, but you could read it on her face. You know, whatever whatever was plastered on below the nose, the eyes told you the real story. And I think that's one of the things that's interesting, is that actually Tracy is actually a very transparent character. She's, you know, if you listen to what she says and what she does, then she's very sincere, and you get it from the heart. So yeah, it takes a complex character to pull something complex like that off, I think.
I mean, within the sport, it was really well received. But how generally, I guess, in your world, how was this film received?
Well, I guess I never personally, I never thought of it as a film about sailing. So I always intended it for an audience beyond the world of sailors. And I think because I went at it with that mindset, it is an accessible film. So actually, while it gets a very enthusiastic response, actually not enthusiastic, let me rephrase that, a very engaged response from sailors, because they know what they're looking at. They know what the challenges that are involved are. They can identify, or, there's a lot of women of Tracy's generation and the generation immediately afterwards who recognize not only the sailing experience, but the experience of being a woman in that sailing world at that time, were very passionate in their response. But I think the themes that the film touches on and Tracy's experience that demonstrates are much wider and much more applicable than just to the sailing world. I think that it certainly speaks to women, but I think it speaks to men too. I think that it's about that personal commitment to something that you believe in, about refusing to take no for an answer, about digging deep when all the odds seem set against you, and about being willing to adapt in the way that you respond to those situations, so that you don't kind of ground yourself on an idea that is never going to be realized, but you allow yourself to look at what it is that what are we trying to achieve here, what are we trying to demonstrate, and how can we adapt what we're doing to that process. I mean, Tracy didn't set out to even put an all-female crew into the race. She just wanted to take part in the race as a sailor. The idea of an all-women crew was an afterthought as a way of achieving that, because there appeared to be no other way of achieving that. So I think that those sorts of lessons and that adaptability combined with that sense of commitment and determination are lessons that we can all learn from and all enjoy.
Well, Alex, thanks very much. I love the film, so congratulations with it, and really a massive thanks for your time today.
Not at all. No, it's my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.
Alex Holmes from New Black Films there, talking to us about the Maiden film. And like I've probably said before, if you haven't actually watched it yet, then make it the next movie you watch. You'll have heard Tracy's story by now, but seeing it all the footage from the race, the interviews of the time, and the team's recollections, it's a real tearjerker, I can promise you. It's an inspiring film, but for me, it also uncovers a slightly darker issue in our particular sport. At the time, Tracy's achievements were seen as a giant step forward for women in sport, but even in society. So I asked Tracy if she thought the campaign had actually made those changes that at the time were being talked about.
I think, I'm not sure how popular this is going to make me, but I don't think enough has changed, if I'm completely honest. I know we're all aware of it, and I know that people are aware of what they can and can't say, but casual sexism in sport is rife. I mean, it's everywhere, it's all around us, and not just sailing. I mean, sailing's appallingly bad. But, with what we're doing now with Maiden, we have an amazing opportunity to speak to the young women who we take sailing as apprenticeships. On each leg we take what we call mile builders. So 2 young women who are trying to get on the ladder, and compete, or, get into big boats, or, whatever. And the stories that we hear now are not dissimilar to the stories that we would have been telling people, 35 years ago, and that's a shame. I think if I'm okay, honestly, I think most people try to get it right. I don't think there's any malice in a journalist asking the wrong question or saying the wrong thing. I don't think it's done for any other reason than it's inherent, it's habitual. We're all ingrained with it, not just men. We are as well. I mean, we absorbed those comments at the time, and okay, fine, that was then. But even now, sometimes I hear things, and my daughter will pull me up and say, "Mum, that's what they said was like quite sexist. I'm like, oh, that is, so it's something we're bumbling through together with, I think, and some are better than others, but this recent story about, the Australian, female football team where, the new away shirts that they've made are only in men's sizes. I think I would put on all of our homework, must do better, must try harder.
Tracy, when the Maiden project is talked about, it's often said that it opened doors for women in the sport, in sailing. But if you take a look at the elite level today, I'm not really sure how wide those doors actually opened. There's no doubt at all to me and to many that you blazed a trail. Your approach, was an inspiration to many. Sam Davies, and I certainly feel the same. But that's not really in question. Looking at our sport, Tracy, with the benefit of a few decades to look back on, what difference do you think the Maiden campaign made?
I think what we did was we proved that women could do it. And we opened doors in the way that women also then believed that they could do it. And so we made it possible. I have very few regrets from the Whitbread. One of them is Mary Claude, and the other one is that we didn't keep up the momentum. I mean, yes, we then did Royal Sun Alliance, which was the first all-female crew to attempt the Jules Verne. But again, we were still the first and a one-off and a kind of like girls on a multi-hull, breaking records. And even the next project, which was the world's first mixed gender team, no one ever did that again. And so I guess what I haven't done really is followed through in a way which I should have done. I hoped that the baton would be picked up and, others would run with it. And they did. It's just that the rest of the world didn't keep up. You look at the Heineken, which had its own problems. But then you look at every all-female crew that's followed Maiden, and none of them have been as successful, even Team SCA. And we were so excited about Team SCA. I remember thinking, oh, this could be it. New boat, loads of money, an amazing team. They could win. And it was so exciting that all that time afterwards. And then you realise the project's run by a bunch of men who are going to choose the skipper at the last minute and portray the project in a way that was hard for women to support. And you just think, we have got to have more women at the core of everything we do. We've got to have them in governing bodies, on race committees, making decisions, at a higher level. I mean, you could say that about any industry and any business and the media and whatever. But I don't think we've done ourselves any favours, with getting women to the top. And I do think, sorry, and again, I'm not going to be popular, but at the top of our sport in governing bodies, as a group of men paying lip service to, oh yeah, equality. Yeah, we must do that one day. Didn't we say the other day we were going to get some equality? Oh yeah, I think that was on our list of things to do. But it's not happening. You can probably tell, I find it incredibly frustrating that I'm still having the same conversations with young women as I was having 35 years ago. And I think there is an element that want to change that, but there are still, men in sailing who don't want women to have equality. And, until they, leave, I think we will still be having an uphill battle. So, I mean, what we're doing with Maiden now, with the Maiden Factor Foundation, is we hope playing a small part in giving young women their miles, and inspiring young girls and telling them, you can do this. Look, listen, if a school dropout with absolutely no hope of achieving anything ever did this, and Maiden is the living proof of that, then this is what you can do. But it's saddening, really, how little our sport has changed. And you look at football and rugby, and they're now ahead of us, and you're like, oh, for goodness sake, really? So, yeah.
I mean, where do you think sailing ranks in gender parity amongst other sports?
I think it's. I think we're still above golf, aren't we? But that could overtake us at any time. Football and rugby are now doing much better than we are. I think we have a lot of work to do, and I think we've got to change the way we do things. I think we've got to have more women putting projects together, because that's why Maiden was so successful. It's because we put our project together. Every all-female crew that came after us was the blokes going, oh, here's a second-hand boat. We'll get some girls to do that one, and then some PR. It's some second-hand stuff you can have as well, and then a little bit of money. Off you go. And to their credit, all of the women that came after us did an incredible job, but with not what we had, which was a fantastic project. So I do think we've got to work harder. I know that there is a level of women at the top, an extraordinary level of women at the top, who need to be asked their opinion more, who need to be involved in more governing bodies, involved in more race committees. And, when world sailing is making decisions, that these women need to be there. And I know often they're not. So, lots of changes, I think, still have to happen. She didn't kill them the first time. She's certainly going to do it with this boat. When I first saw her, it looked like she was leashed to the dock. I was then held there illegally for a month, and by the time I eventually got home, I'd been forced into bankruptcy.
But let's get back to you and your career. I mean, Maiden wasn't to be your only sailing project. You bought ENZA in the late 90s, the 75-foot Jules Verne record holder. The goal, an all-women's attempt on the ultimate round-the-world record. I mean, it was such an exciting campaign, so exciting that Sam Davies, who was sailing with me in the Olympic world, packed her bags and hot-footed it back to the UK to be part of it all. I won't hold it against you, Tracy. I mean, it was, how did it all happen? I mean, it was so exciting.
Well, I was happily living on my little small holding in Wales when Howard Gibbons called me up and said, do you want to come to the Yachtsman of the Year lunch? Because, they'd like to invite you. And, some people would like to know you're still alive. So I was like, yeah, okay. So I went to the awards, and the people winning it were Sir Robin Knox-Johnson and Sir Peter Blake. And they showed footage of this catamaran. And I just went, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that next. And Howard looked at me and he went, oh, really? So I just thought, again, women, no woman had tried the Jules. No woman had been on the Jules Verne. Like, what is going on? I thought we were progressing here, but we're not. So I thought, again, let's do an all-female crew for the Jules Verne. So yeah, we bought ENZA. Scariest boat I've ever sailed on in my life. And we literally started from scratch again, really, because one of the first articles I read in a newspaper was she didn't kill them the first time. She's certainly going to do it with this boat. And it's like, oh my God, it's like we haven't done anything. There was a bigger pool of women to choose from, which was hugely noticeable. And that was great. And Mickey, who's been on every one of my projects with me, she's the only one that can, handle me for that long. She came with me, and then we put together this other amazing all-female crew. Sam Davis, Sharon Ferris-Choate, Emma Richards, she was at the time, and Miranda Merrin. They all went on to do these amazing things. It was so much fun, that project. It was, we scared the living daylights out of ourselves, sort of doing ridiculous speeds on that boat. And we broke 7 world records on the way around. And before, I think we set the channel record. It was the fastest record in the world at the time. And then we went off to do the Jules Verne. We would have broken the record if we hadn't lost our mast in the Southern Ocean, but 'twas not to be. We pushed the hell out of the boat. We lost our mast in the Southern Ocean and had to get ourselves to Chile. So that was a bit of a shame.
Once again, it was a challenge to make it all work commercially. Why do that? Remortgage your house, put it all on the line. What is it about Tracy Edwards that she has to keep going through that?
I just think that the work isn't done, and sometimes I get annoyed with myself if I feel like I've tinkered around the edges and haven't really got into something. And I am so passionate about equality. I didn't ever believe I could be this passionate about something and this angry about something as well at times. And I think when my daughter was born, it just exacerbated everything, because it made me realise that my work here is not done. And, I have a daughter who is still going to be struggling with casual sexism, with being bullied on social media, with being threatened if she dares to stand up and have an opinion, is going to be, hassled in the workplace. And I just thought every stage of everything I've done, I've always thought that if I leave this world and haven't done absolutely everything within my power to change what I know we can change, then what's the point? And the kiss of death that my mother did for me was she said to me one day, never give up today, because you'll never know if it was going to happen tomorrow. And it's like, oh, great. Oh, thanks for that. Right, that's brilliant. So it's just that overwhelming need to keep going. I don't ever want to wake up ever in my life and say, I wonder if I'd have managed it, but I just tried a little bit harder. So that's what drives me.
Well, as you say, you did get a sponsor, didn't you? Royal Sun Alliance, and you set off on the Jules Verne. I mean, epic, amazing. Giant boat, pushing hard all the time against the clock. I mean, what do you remember of that challenge? And perhaps share your memories of the moment it all came to an end.
Mostly abject terror, I have to say. We when we got this boat, I remember Ed Danby, who was our project manager. He was in San Diego when I went to have a look at the boat. And I remember when I first saw her, it looked like she was leashed to the dock. She wasn't just tied up alongside, she was leashed down. And, I remember him saying to me, there's so many ways this boat can kill you. The power of the catamaran. I mean, that was, completely new for all of us. And there really wasn't a British team that had raced a maxi multihull. So I remember that we got the lovely Laurent Bourguignon, who's no longer with us. He came over from France to teach us how to sail a multihull. It seemed really important that we tap into this amazing success story, this love story, if you like, between the French and multihulls, which the British didn't really get. And that was a huge thing for us, and that was such a great thing. I think otherwise I don't think we would have survived. But racing around the world on that thing it's indescribable. I mean, the exhilaration is off the scale. And most of the time you're not trying to make her go fast. You're trying to control her. You're trying to draw her back, and make sure you're not overtaking waves. At one point, you're worried that you might overtake a weather pattern, and your brain just goes, what? I mean, it is just extraordinary. So it's massively stressful, as well as exhilarating, because you cannot relax for a moment on this boat. If it goes over, and we were told the boat floats on its hulls and everything else, but we're like, yeah, we'd rather not test that theory. So it's this constant thought process, and it's tiring being frightened for a long time, and maybe frightened's the wrong word, but anxious, extremely anxious. And when she's slamming into waves and you think, oh, my filling's all still there, have I impacted my spine? It's the most uncomfortable thing that you've ever been on in your life. But, when you are hooning down those waves and you've got the wind behind you, it's unbelievable. We were well on track to break the record, which was held by Olivier de Curzon at the time, who is like the legend of sailing, my absolute hero. What a character. And unfortunately, we lost our mast in the Southern Ocean 2,000 miles before Cape Horn, actually quite close to where Susie Goodall was turned over quite recently in the race, very sadly. And I mean, after the initial shock of nearly going over, and we really, nearly did, we went right up on the bows, and it was the wave that destroyed us, that sort of rolled under us and allowed us to come back. But the stress on the mast was just way too much. We thought we got away with it. And then I remember I was down the nav station with Adrian. So we've both sort of been thrown around and we're up trying, getting dressed. And Mickey came down and she just said, the mast is going. And the just absolute devastation. Of course, the first thought is, oh, we're not going to break the record. And the next thought is, oh, we actually need to survive this. Right, okay. So then something kicks in and you forget everything except we need to live. And so we were able to put up a jury rig from broken bits of the mast. And it is impossible to imagine the more in the middle of nowhere it is, it's possible to get. And furthest from land, I think it's possible to get. So we knew we had to get ourselves out of it. Luckily I, again, had an extraordinary, amazing team. We put up a jury rig and then it took us 17 days, 17 of the slowest days ever, to sail to Puerto Montt in Chile, where we saw humanity for the first time in, it was nearly 2 months at that point. So, yeah.
You didn't think about doing it again, Tracy? Once was enough.
I did think about doing it again, actually. And in the interview, there is a film. We're all trying to find this film that was made by the BBC, but we can't seem to get our hands on it. It's called Girls and Boys. So there's a bit in it where I'm interviewed afterwards. And I do say, I feel very strongly that someone's got to do this, and I feel that it's got to be me. And then I became pregnant with my daughter and decided that I didn't want to risk my life at sea anymore.
You did, though, set up the Oryx Quest, the first ever round-the-world race to start from the Middle East. 4 giant multihulls taking it on. It was big budget, it was glitzy, it was innovative. Funding to the tune of, I think, 38 million, from the state of Qatar, with a prize purse of 1 million for the first home. I mean, it was big money, Tracy. It was big stakes, and it was so exciting in the sport of sailing. How did all that come about?
Yes, one of my biggest life lessons. So, initially, when my daughter was very young, I put together Maiden 2, which was Grant Dalton's Club Med, so the 125-foot catamaran, to break records, to just break records. And I wanted to put together the world's first mixed-gender professional sailing racing team, because I thought, female crews aren't working. We're proving that we can do it and nothing's happening. So, the remaining girls from Maiden 2, we got together and we said, what do we do next to make this change? And they said, let's get guys on the boat and let's make it a mixed team. I thought, that's a brilliant idea. So we had Brian Thompson, who was unknown then, as one of our skippers, and the amazing Helena Darvelid. And then we had 6 girls and 6 guys. And they broke more world records, I think, in a 10-year period than anyone had done. Fastest ocean record, 24-hour record of 784 miles. That's just, what? So that was a load of fun. And then really the Oryx Quest came about because I went to a meeting in Paris with Olivier and Bruno and a couple of other people, I can't remember. And we were saying, we need some kind of circuit. We can't just keep all randomly going out and breaking records. If we can come together and have some sort of circuit or governing body, we can raise the hard, really the sponsorship money, which is really hard to raise. And so I remember Olivier looking at me and he said, well, you're a single mother. You've got not much on. Why don't you organise it? And I'm like, right, okay. So, I don't think he was serious, but I was. And just at that point, I met someone who said to me, oh, have you heard that Qatar is buying all these big sporting events? And I thought, oh, sporting events? So off I went over to Qatar and signed what we thought was an amazing deal for a lot of money that could have made a massive, huge difference to our sport. Not just that race, but, across the globe. And the money didn't arrive. So we then got sponsorship from HSBC to pay for the Oryx Quest, which was great. We paid all the entries we paid everyone $1 million to sail around the world. And when we got to the end of the event, we found out that our sponsor had liquidated the company with whom we'd signed the agreement and wasn't going to pay us. And I'd borrowed a lot of money to make up the shortfall. And that was in 2005. I was then held there illegally for a month. I had to get everyone out of the country. I was held there. This is not unusual. This is normal behaviour. And when by the time I eventually got home, I'd been forced into bankruptcy. So everything just sort of came crashing down. I mean, the race was a huge success. I mean, this was the first time a trimaran had raced a catamaran. The first time. This was the first time Olivier de Kersauson had ever raced any other person. He'd always just done records. You know, so we had PlayStation, we had my boat, which was Maiden 2, which then became Doha 2006, and we had Tony Bullimore, bless him, in my other old boat, which was Royal Sun Alliance. So it was extraordinary. It was apart from the fact that I lost everything and had to start from scratch at the age of 43. The race itself was brilliant. Everyone enjoyed it. It was a massive undertaking, and it really showed what these big multi-hulls could do. And if I have to say I lost heart a little bit after that. But if someone sort of could build on that would be pretty amazing. I mean, multi-hulls are just awesome, and obviously not as awesome as Maiden, who is obviously my firstborn. But
Tracy, why wouldn't they let you leave Qatar? Why wouldn't they let you leave? How scary must that have all been?
Oh, it was really horrifying. I mean, I'm smiling now, but I certainly wasn't then. So what happened was I'd been, this trust thing again. I really must stop trusting people. So many people said to me, don't trust them. You get the money up front, and I was like, no, we've got this contract and they love what we're doing, and we're living, and my daughter and I were living there, and so we obviously didn't realise that they were going to liquidate the company, with whom we had the contract, and not pay us, and that I was going to be left owing the bank a lot of money. But that's what happened, and then that was when I got not nasty, but that was the first ruffling that I'd done, when I threatened legal action. Because they'd reformed the company with the same directors, different names, same shareholders, same office, same phone number. It's like, okay. So I threatened legal action, and things got very nasty very quickly. So my daughter was 5. I managed to get her flown out of the country with a friend, and managed to get everyone else out. And I said I'd stay behind and try and sort things out. And that's when they refused my exit visa, which you need a residence visa to live there. To do things like buy alcohol, which if you live there, you need to be able to do. And for my daughter to go to school and to do anything, really. But that also means you need an exit visa when you leave. And if they refuse you an exit visa, you can't leave. And I was held there for the whole of July in 2005. I was followed, my phones were tapped, I was threatened, I was told to sign bits of paper that I didn't know what they meant, and in the end, my mum called Terry Waite, which because, my mum, I miss her so much. Of course she called Terry Waite, why wouldn't you? And he introduced her to someone who introduced us to an ex-ambassador of the country who knew the Emir of Qatar, who's actually a lovely man. I wasn't being held by him, he was great. And I don't think he knew I was there either. And eventually I managed to get out, but it was the scariest month of my life, for sure. I mean, there are people that have been held there for months. There have been people held there for years. One person committed suicide while I was there, jumped off a building because he couldn't get out. And for a number of years afterwards, I actually worked with a group of people helping to get foreigners out of Qatar. And so, then to add insult to injury, once everything came crashing down, there was still, we're still in a legal battle with them 15 years later. So, it's, but not unusual. So,
you did get out eventually.
I got
As
out.
You say you were bankrupt, 8 million in personal debts, and the marine world chasing you for money. How did that period?
Well, actually, no
affect you,
one in
Tracy?
no one in the marine world chasing me for money. We didn't owe our suppliers anything at all. I owed the bank money, and there was a little bit of a misconception about that, and that's why I walked away from sailing, because I actually couldn't be bothered to argue with people that should have known me better.
How did you recover from it all?
Well, I had a 5-year-old daughter and a disabled mother, and no home and no money, so I didn't really have much choice. So I had to start from scratch, and one of them, I had some wonderful creditors. One of them said, I'll pay the rent on a house in London for a year, help you get back on your feet. I'm like, I don't think you're supposed to do that. He said, no, it's not your fault. So we moved to London. It was the first time actually ever I didn't have to live near a marina. And I went, I said to Mac, who's 5 years old, should we go to London? She's like, yes. So we ended up in Putney, where we've been for 15 years. The first year of you're bankrupt for a year, it's horrendous. It's absolutely appalling. And anyone who I ever hear says, I'll just go bankrupt, I say to them, don't do it. It's awful. If I hadn't been forced, I would have, sort of not done it. But so you have to go through the process with, the whole legal process, and with the government, HMRC, to make sure you haven't done anything wrong. So you're trying to survive with no bank account, dealing with cash, trying to get a job, and having to give your time to, go through all this stuff with the ombudsman and everything else. And the creditor who forced me into bankruptcy was sure that I had millions of pounds stashed away somewhere. I wish I'd been that smart, but yeah. So going through that process is incredibly stressful, and it's a real... I wrote quite a bit about this at the time. It's a real problem with the bankruptcy process, because someone is allowed to force you into bankruptcy to see if you've got any money. Whereas if you could just call in someone first to say, can you check that I haven't got any money? You'd be able to avoid that. But anyway, it's done now. And then I had to go and get my first real job at the age of 43 with no education, no qualifications. I hadn't ever even written a CV in my life. So it was, I'm laughing now, but it was awful. It was absolutely awful. And as I say, if I hadn't had my mother and my daughter, I don't quite know if I would have got through that time. And there are plenty of people that don't. But in the end, I ended up working for the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre at CEOP, learning about child abuse online and how to keep kids safe online. So just completely, different change of direction. One of the best things I have ever done in my life. I mean, it was an honour to work with these policemen and women and learn all this stuff, and be part of writing the resolution to the 2009 resolution on the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, and I didn't see that in my future. So I think, these things can either make you or break you, and you have to choose. And you either go under, or you hold your head up and you dust yourself off and you start again. And that's what I decided to do. And about the time that Maiden showed up on the scene 5 years ago, I just about kind of, I was released from bankruptcy after a year because I hadn't done anything wrong. And then, CEOP, and then starting my own business. And, so I was just about back on my feet again when Maiden showed up. So I was just thinking, I would love another project. And then Maiden was going, I'm here.
I mean, Tracy, you're unstoppable, really, aren't you? I mean, the new Glistening Maiden, she has already been on a tour of the planet. What does she mean to you now?
Well, my daughter calls her my firstborn. And Maiden was always very special to us. I mean, not least probably because we did rebuild her with our own hands, and she got us safely round in one piece. And we broke very little, on the way round. And over the years, I would catch a glimpse of her every so often looking sadder or, being worked to death and no money being put into her. So that was really, really hard. And of course, when we found her then in the Seychelles, it was like, I didn't realise that I felt quite that way about Maiden. I mean, I love her, she's my boat. But I remember when I got the email from the marina saying, she's been here for 2 years, she's rotting away, this beautiful boat, we think you don't know, and if nothing happens, we're going to take her out and sink her because she's not even worth scrap. And I just went, what? And I remember calling all the other, the original Maiden crew and went, we've got to do something. So they helped me put a crowdfunder together, and we bought her again. And that was in October 2016. And then I had a phone call from Princess Haya, who's King Hussein's daughter, saying, I hear you've rescued Dad's boat. What can I do to help? So I said, we need a lot of money. So she's like, yeah, okay. What are we going to do with the boat? So we shipped her back, did a massive restoration, restored her to her former glory. And then I literally had a meeting with Princess Haya and we said, well, let's do something really amazing with her. Let's give her a new lease of life, maybe for the next generation. And, what are we looking at? What are we doing here? So girls' education was a big focus for me. I was a patron of some girls' educational charities, the same with Princess Haya. So we said, well, if we do like a lap of honour, like a tour around the world, and we can raise money and awareness for girls' education, and we can inspire young women on the way, or we could have apprentices on the boat, and guests could donate money, so it all, again, like Maiden, kind of came together like this. And then in November 2018, we set off on a 3-year world tour, which was going to be 90,000 miles. And visit, I think it was over 60 destinations in over 22 countries. We were having a fabulous time until March this year. I mean, Maiden is not just special to me, and this is something really amazing I've learned. Maiden is really special to other people. And, we get this extraordinary reaction when she sails into port. I mean, again, it's like the finish, she has her own fan club. I don't have a fan club. But what we've learned over the last year and a half is that she's not just really good at raising money for girls' education. Interacting with communities, is something that we've discovered is what makes us unique. We've got this amazing young all-female crew. We've had extraordinary skippers. We had Nikki Henderson as our first skipper. We've had Wendy Tuck and Liz Wardley. Our next skipper is Annie O'Sullivan when we start again next year. Of course, we had to finish in March, but everything we've learned just tells us we've got to continue with this tour. We've got to continue inspiring young women. We've got to continue showing them what they can do. Raising funds and awareness, and working with and supporting communities who already enable girls into education, but it's giving them that extra, whatever it is that we can bring to the party. And we have loved every single minute. It's the most joyful project I have ever done in my life. And to be able to do it with Maiden and my daughter working for me, running the shore events, it's a long way from where I was 15 years ago. And, I just couldn't be happier than with what we're doing. And it's just a shame we have to take a brief break.
Tracy Edwards, you've lived a life, that's for sure. It's been a roller coaster. What would you say to that young, determined, tempestuous girl running away to Greece now? What advice would you give her?
Oh, I don't know if I'd give her any advice. I think I would. No, actually, I wouldn't give her any advice. Maybe younger, I would have. My advice to young people would be to never stop moving. And if I look back at how I stumbled into every great situation I stumbled into by more luck than judgment, it was because I was always moving forwards. My mum once said to me, there are two certainties in life. If you stand still, nothing will happen. It's an absolute certainty. But if you take steps and move forwards, something will happen. You may not know what it is, you may not know if you're going in the right direction, or even what you want. But as long as you're moving and connecting with the universe, something will happen. And then you can make that your something, change direction, change path, or whatever. So if I had any advice for young people, keep moving forwards, keep moving.
Tracy Edwards, thank you. Sincerely, it's been great to catch up. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shirley. It's so great to see you again.
What an inspiration. She's had quite a life, hasn't she? Ladies and gentlemen, the incredible Tracy Edwards. Such a wonderful speaker with so much to tell. I do hope you all enjoyed listening as much as we did. We'd love to hear from you. Send us your feedback. It's all important in the podcast world. So please let me know what you think. And if you've got 5 minutes, why not write a review, or do please subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on. As ever, the podcast is produced thanks to the tireless work of Tim at Vertigo Films. A massive thanks to Tim for all the time he puts into making the podcast what it is. And another big thanks to Tracy for agreeing to talk to us and for being so very open. It was great to catch up. So that's it from us. Next month, our plans have been a little bit railroaded by the current travel issues. We had planned to be recording from the start of the Vendée Globe. It's one of my favourite races to go to, as many of you will know. But getting there is a little bit complicated right now. But we shall prevail. And with the help of a few friends, we'll be bringing you a very special look at that amazing race. So we're looking forward to that. That's all from us until next time. Thank you so much for listening, and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming.
We're 1.5 below.
2 dives here, boys.
We're looking at 10.5 to 42.
This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.